Hello everyone and welcome to edition 8 of the UK Paintball Podcast. Joining me today is Chaplen of GI Sportz Europe and Paintball Performance. If you've been playing paintball in the UK for a long time, it's more likely than not that you have run into Ash at some stage, whether that be at the GI Paint Truck, coaching SAD, big games, the NXL, CPPS or the UK Woodland Masters. He is also one of the stars of a new series of films featuring 6mm Mike. Time to hear all about it. Welcome Ash!
That's the most important part.
Well, at the end there with the
6mm Mike, yeah.
So he's certainly a creative one, that right?
I'm just honoured to be able to spend every day in his presence. You know, such a huge star.
I'm sure everyone else would be as well. So let's get straight into this. So, how did you start in your paintball journey?
Oh God, it's going back a while, probably before some of the listeners might even be born at this rate. That's how old I'm getting. When was it? Must have been 2001. Rental day, birthday party, buddy at college kind of thing. Quite a big group of us, actually, like 30 odd people or something went down, and I had a really good time actually. Just kind of gassing around in the woods and playing up with the whole toy soldiers kind of thing, and loved it. Went back kind of 3 or 4 times in quick succession, and some of the marshals at the site that we played at, which is a field called Ground Control Paintball down in Littlehampton, were kind of frequent players anyway, and they kind of very quickly tapped us into this idea that you could form a team and play tournaments and stuff, and that was just kind of like mind blown for us really. So easily within a year, we'd kind of formed this little kind of 5-man team and started playing some local events. Like for those who remember, that was back around there was a series of events called a Paintball Temple, which is near East Grinstead, not too far from where we are now. And then you had like the M25 League, and then kind of what became Dartford Sevens and so on. Yeah, so it was 7-man back then. It wasn't 5-man, it wasn't race. Very quickly kind of found myself playing Millenniums. So by 2003, I think I played my first Millennium Series event. I then only missed one Millennium event between then and whenever the last Millennium was in 2017. I went to every event bar one, which was Malaga in 2004. Because that for some reason that year there was like 8 or 9 Millennium events, because they had like a kind of affiliate. They had like bigger events and smaller events, and I played all bar one of them that year. But yeah, so wow. It was
an insane amount on top of everything else local as well.
But then it wasn't so much kind of formal structure back then. Like there was lots of independent leagues. So you had kind of like Midland Masters, kind of at Utoxeter, and then there was just so many. And then you had like I can't remember. There was a magazine, an old UK magazine, that ran a series like the Paint League or something. I can't remember what it was. It was I thought it was held at like Ancaster or something. So there was kind of a lot more fragmented back then. Lots of smaller, more frequent events, which now it's kind of all consolidated into CPPS.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Awesome. Well, plenty of experience then. The fact that you've talked about the Millenniums as well, obviously the majority of that was with London Nexus. Correct me if I'm wrong. So what's kind of your journey from that perspective? Like what's the pro kind of side of things from your point of view?
I mean, like, so right from the very first time I played a tournament, like I kind of always had one eye on kind of achieving that level. I think it kind of helped that somewhat of a name drop here, but for those of you who might remember, Tommy Pemberton, who used to play for Nexus, he was like the OG Nexus team, like played on the GB Nation squad that played the first ever X-Ball event and kind of became Nexus in its original form. Tommy was one of the marshals at the field where I first played, and was one of the guys that kind of put us onto this whole you can play for a team and you can play tournaments and stuff. So kind of, I guess I had quite a immediate access to someone who was in that position, and it was just like I'm just going to do that. Like I just want to do that. and that was all it was about for years. So I actually played like my first pro event with Manchester Shockwave in 2004. I played a couple of events with them that season, but kind of bounced around between pro and semi-pro for a number of years before. I think it was 2010 before I was on Nexus full-time, properly actually playing. Like I had like a kind of couple of years with them where I was like kind of on the squad but not really playing at the events. So then I played like a year with ECI in the divisionals, and then I played another year with London Tigers, and it was kind of all about like training with Nexus enough to get really good, but playing with those teams enough to actually learn your craft in the events, because training is good and all. You can practice and you can get really good technical skills, but I've seen a ton of players who over the years who kind of have like the most wicked snapshot, but you put them in a game situation, they just kind of get their head blown off because they're not match smart, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So for me there was a good couple of years of kind of like developing on both fronts, and it took a long time. Like I say, like considering I played my first pro event in 2004, and it was 6 years later before I would actually call myself a pro player. Like I was on a pro roster, I was actually playing regularly for a pro squad.
Sure.
Then like there was a lot of time kind of invested in going back and forth in playing. Mm-hmm. Training with pro teams, getting the odd points here, and then end up having like go and play events and whole seasons even with other teams to go and be a starter and actually like go and produce and perform at like the deep end of tournaments, because it's different,
Yeah.
It's so, not.
Is that, sorry to interrupt, is that one of the major differences then, would you say, from the step from kind of amateur play up to that pro level?
Oh, absolutely. And it's like steps on steps on steps, like one of my biggest gripes in general is I see like players and teams do it in equal measure, actually. They kind of get a little bit of a taste of progression of kind of approaching success, and then decide that makes them ready to be the next level up. And it's like, no, there's every single little gain like that is hard earned, and you have to kind of repeat it over and over before it really sinks in. So, if you kind of go and come fifth in Division 3, that doesn't mean that you're ready to go play Div 2. It means that you're almost good enough to compete in Div 3. Do you know what I mean?
So
like,
yeah,
and people are skipping steps mentally. Like they kind of think that makes them closer to something that's still 3 steps down the line.
Sure. So there's quite a lot of like discipline involved with it then.
Yeah, and it was, and that kind of just multiplies with every step up you go. Like I don't know if you watch, but I totally indulged myself and reshared the Nexus documentaries that we filmed back in when was that? 2011. And Clint says something in those videos, I can't remember which one, but he says, like pro is about Sunday, not Friday or Saturday. Obviously, the Millennium event's played over 3 days, so you play your prelims Friday, Saturday, and then finals is Sunday.
Sure.
It's like pro is about Sunday. Like, so just being in the pro division and being and playing those prelim games doesn't really make you a pro player.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it only really counts if you can make the quarterfinals, make podium finishes, win events. Like, that's when you're truly pro. And there's kind of the same reasoning can be applied all the way down the divisions, but you just see far too many players that have like a half decent finish, and they're like, right, okay, this is sweet. This means I'm really good. I need to go play 2 divisions higher now. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, like honor the process, man. Like take your time and really learn the lessons and digest everything, because there's a lot more like layers. Layers is kind of the way I think of paintball. There's so many layers to kind of peel back and learn and digest and understand that. There's no shortcut. There is no shortcut.
Would you say then that the definition of pro kind of has changed since then? Obviously, 2011 wasn't that long ago, really. So kind of since the paintball heyday, if you like, the mid noughties or 90s or whatever, everyone kind of has a different definition of that. So is the definition of a pro player different now, would you say?
I mean, a lot of things are different I mean, it's not that long ago, but 10 years ago is kind of a lifetime in paintball. You know, so like, there's probably a significant percentage of paintballers that don't even play paintball for 9 years of their lives. You know, they kind of come and go in that time. So yeah, there's a lot's changed. I mean, are we talking pro in the sense of like, because I think right now the only way you can kind of truly call yourself pro is if you're playing US NXL right now.
Yeah. This was
back then you had a lot more US kind of presence in the European leagues, but at the same time the European teams were competitive. They weren't knocking off the US teams, but it was the mix was kind of just about right. The US teams were good, but the European teams were kind of shooting for them, and every event one of the US teams would tend to be a scalp, you know. And it wasn't like this. Like, so you look at like NXL last year, right? You had 4 American Russians, and then the 3 American teams, right?
Yep,
one of them being a kind of homemade super team, but still it was an American roster, right?
Yep.
Just absolutely battered the pants off of all the European teams. You know, like, okay, but Blast and Joy Division got a 4th place apiece, right, which and don't get me wrong, like I think those are 2 good teams, but that was the closest any European team came all year. 2 teams did the, I suppose, like the absolute minimum to kind of call yourself a decent pro team out of the rest of that division. It's like the gap is just huge now. And actually, like, for the record, I'm a fan of what the NXL is proposing this year, or have done this year, by removing the American teams, because I think maybe this year the standard might not be comparable, but I think on a long enough timeline, the European teams will come to, like, the good European teams will come to the fore, and it will actually give them a chance to kind of develop. And like I say, because at the moment, only 2 European teams played a semi-final all last year, right? So none of the rest of the teams had experience in going deep in a tournament. Like, because honestly, I mean, so some people listening to this might only play paintball like one-day events, and even then, if you play prelims and semis and finals in a one-day event, like, it's hard. But doing that over a 3 or 4 day event, like, is actually even more draining, I think. Like, it takes a lot more out, because you have to manage yourself. You have to manage the downtime, which is a lot harder than it sounds.
Sure. I mean, like, even as a player, like, I can just as someone on the sidelines filming these events, it's you can see how the time just takes it out of players completely, because although the games are generally well structured, sometimes especially in pro, obviously, the brackets are always going to be playing within a few hours, but even just managing that time, like, if you're playing in the morning, what are you going to do spending the rest of your time in the afternoon? What are you going to be doing with that, or vice versa? So time management in those events is really, really important. And I think even though some teams might look at these events and go, oh, I've only got 2 games today, it's not like that at all. You've still got to consider it as a kind of full day event.
Well, and you have to, and it's like you have to get up for every match. You know, you don't get up for the first game of the day and then you kind of ride the wave. Like, the downtime, you have to completely switch off. You have to kind of go into like a kind of just, put that away. Whatever's happened before, go back through your routine right from scratch. And yeah, like, you'll play, because most of these teams will practice like the Wednesday or Thursday before the event. And then you'll have a game, 2 games Friday, 2 games Saturday, and then whatever on Sunday. Like, although it might not be that much more field time than if you played that in one day, where the matches are a bit more on and off, like, the soreness and so on, it really sets in. And like I say, you have to be fit to do it over 4 or 5 days, however long you're at these events for. Like, you can't just kind of rock off and have a Red Bull to blow off the kind of the hangover-y type, shady feeling that you get first thing in the morning and roll through. Like, these, you look at some of these guys you're playing against, and they're dedicating their whole lifestyle to it, and yeah, if you want to compete with them, you have to be on the same level.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. So with the lack of the American teams then going back to obviously this point, do you think it's going to be a far more competitive European season?
I think it'll be more open, um, largely because like the middle pack teams will have more opportunity to play each other, right? So obviously, given that those American teams dominated so many of the finals positions,
Hmm.
and it was just a case of who had the upper hand between those old rivalries on the day.
Yep.
Now you're going to get that kind of some of that next tier of teams will come through, um, a bit more regularly, and actually you'll start to see some more open, some more seesaw battles, because none of these teams are like a finished article yet, right? Like,
Yep.
maybe there's an argument to make for Tonton because they spent last year honing themselves in the US.
Hmm.
So I do expect them to come in strong, but yeah, a lot of these teams are going to find themselves in slightly unfamiliar territory at some point this season. You know, they're going to be
Yep.
further along than they have done before, and it's going to be interesting to see how they all handle it.
So obviously you've mentioned the Tonsons there. I think they're a brilliant example of probably one of the favourites coming into this season as far as Europe's concerned.
Yep.
They're on the other side of that, even though I love these guys to bits. The Droogs they didn't have the best kind of semi-pro journey last season. So what can we kind of expect from matchups like that, from where you've got these semi-pro teams that play semi-pro in a certain way and might not have had the greatest success, but could they potentially come into pro and cause upsets as well?
I think they can, and I think they will, for maybe not Tauntauns, but some of those other teams,
Hmm.
like with a bit of chaos. Like, the one thing with pro is, predictable is the wrong word, but you know to a certain extent what you're dealing with. You know, like you know the guys at the other end are good shooters, so you can't just run the corner every point and so on. Like, everything's like, if you watch a pro match, typically it's kind of cagey. You know, it's a bit like boxing.
Yep.
You're not opening up too early, so people play short, they play safe. There's a lot of shooting, and you're trying to earn moves. Every single move on the field is earned. You know, you can't kind
Absolutely.
of take a liability against someone because you think he's not that good a shot or whatever. Like, they're all good shots, right?
Hmm.
And so some of these mid-level teams and the semi-pro teams that maybe don't have that kind of structure that's been reinforced into them over the last couple of seasons of playing at a higher level might come in and do some really unexpected stuff.
Hmm.
That's definitely a possibility. So yeah, you might get some real kind of curveballs, but then, even then, the good teams will still rise to the top because it's multi-point format, and those kind of tricks only work once. And unless you're good enough to defend a 1-0 lead,
Hmm.
you can't rely on that as a method
Yeah.
for success. You know. But then it's going to be interesting because, like, I literally just put one of these up last night, about the kind of hired guns that are going out to different teams this year. So, like, Benfica have signed Malloy from Russian Legion.
Yep.
Like, Malloy's an incredible player, unbelievable, like top 5 all-time player.
Hmm.
But he's still only one of the 5. You know, so the other 4 guys have got to bring something to the field. Otherwise, Malloy's just going to play a lot of 5-on-1s this year.
Right.
Um, and so yeah, like, the onus is still on, like, the rest of the Benfica players to actually kind of go out there and produce something. You know,
Hmm. Is there going to
otherwise
be
the investment's not really worth it.
yeah, no, absolutely. As far as the kind of overall NXL experience goes, then, do you think there's going to be uh, a gap there, considering that there are potentially going to be less US pros coming over? Are we going to see them coming over anyway, just to see what's going on, or do you think kind of the entire kind of North American involvement isn't going to be as dramatic as it has been?
None. I mean, for sure, none of them are just going to hop on a plane to come sit in the stands, right?
Yep.
Like, these guys come because there's something in it for them.
Hmm.
Normally a paycheck, or in some cases it's a sponsor that has a vested interest this side of the pond, and they're kind of helping pick
Sure.
up some of the tab to get this guy over here so their European flagship team does okay. So really, that kind of puts the limit at, there's going to be 20 American pros in the league.
Hmm.
Potentially, that's assuming everyone takes the offer up. Now,
Yep.
I'm fairly certain a fair few won't. I honestly don't think Tonton will. I don't think Joy Division will. I've got a fairly strong feeling Lucky 15s aren't going to look down that route because that's not their kind of mantra. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the different methods work for different people.
Yeah, of course. So going on to our teams then, we've obviously got the Firm and we've also got the Lucky 15s playing pro. What is your expectation there?
So
I know this is a big question, so we can
it is,
break this down if we need to.
Well, I mean, to be honest, if you actually look at historically, neither team has like amazing NXL records the last time they played. Like, obviously, neither team played it last year, but Firm played pro the year before, and well, they had a real dog of a season. Like, I think they won 2 matches all year, and that was both at the last event. And unfortunately, it wasn't enough to scrape them through to quarters or something. So,
Sure.
Not a great return. They played semi-pro last year and came second in Amsterdam, I think. But I don't know how much of that was the squad that's going to be playing pro this year, because both teams now have got an interesting kind of conundrum in what their NXL squads are going to be and what their CPPS squads are going to be, because almost in a similar way to like NXL's one US pro rule, I believe CPPS are like, but the pro teams aren't going to be playing at CPPS, right? So 15s, effectively the 15s Mustangs team is going to be playing CPPS this year as Lucky 15s, and Firm EDS is going to be playing CPPS this year, whether they call it Firm or Firm EDS, I don't know, whatever. But they're allowed, I think they're going to be allowed to have one player from their pro squad to kind of bridge, and then I guess it's kind of be there as like a kind of guiding talent, similar to what the NXL US pro rule is, right? And I don't know how either team are splitting down their rosters at the minute. I've got a fairly solid idea who it is, but I don't want to break anyone's news before it's out there.
That's fair enough. Yeah, no. So I think from my perspective, obviously the 15s, talking about them specifically, this is the only kind of rough stat I have in my head. When they were playing, I think it was semi-pro D1. Yeah, semi-pro D1 in the 2018 series. They had enough kind of consistent finishes to earn their pro spot from that, and obviously it wasn't taken for whatever reason. I don't want to get into that. But do you think now there's enough of a change there, and they've kind of built up enough of a more consistent squad and a more consistent game plan via CPPS, and the DPL as well has obviously helped?
So DPL I think is the key here, right? So if I had a criticism of Lucky 15s 2 years ago, it was that they've done very well getting to where they've got within their own kind of bubble, like they stay at CPPS, they train at CPPS all the time, they train whoever's there, they train amongst themselves, and they push each other on to get better, and it's done them really good, right? But that season, if you look at their European results, I think their best finish was a 4th, they really did struggle when they left CPPS. I think they won the CPPS series title that year. They won 3 events at CPPS, like they were top boy, right? But at NXL, it wasn't quite the same kind of easy ride, so I think they did struggle when they got against a certain, I don't know if it was a European style, like specific to maybe German teams or Russian teams or whatever, or just the fact that they're not at CPPS on their lovely turf pitch and they're playing on a rough bit of grass in the middle of a horse track in France or whatever. And yeah, they weren't as good. They weren't as clinical and as kind of cutthroat as they were on their own patch, Last year they continued really well at CPPS, did super good again, like the 15s Mustang squad as well, like just went to another level. There was not much to pick between the two teams, to be honest. So as a squad, their overall capacity improved, and then going to the DPL and coming second, I think that was the real key to them, because it kind of gave them some insight against playing against some other like really good teams. And that's not to knock the teams that are in CPPS elite division, but to go and play against Breakout Spa, whether they've got all of their foreign contingent or not. Like that breakout squad is good. You know, those guys are at it at their home field, hammer and tongs every week. They've got a couple of guys that have played, a couple of European guys that have managed to play on US pro teams. They bring in a US pro player or two. Like that is a stacked roster. Likewise, playing against, you had like I don't think Coming At You was there last year, were they? Oh no, they were. Coming At You was there. Yep. Coming At You have had previous pro experience with the NXL. You've got Cologne Hurricanes, who are a current NXL pro team. You've got Mercs, who again, like Benfica, had Malloy playing for them all year. So the standard they came up against was a much higher grade, and I think that kind of gave them a bit more razor sharpness, you know. And you need that as a team. You need to go away and kind of have these road trips where it's literally just, you know, the 6 or 8 of you, whatever it is, and you have to kind of deal with everything. Whether it could be the travel, it could be getting to the other end in your rental car. They've given you a blimmin' Fiat 500 and not a bloody multivan or whatever. Like, you know, you have to deal with all those things. And although it might not seem relevant in the slightest to what goes on the paintball field, it all builds towards it. And so I think, I
it's
do
something
think
as
the
simple as
DPL,
getting a good night's sleep or a good hotel or a good meal or whatever it might be.
Yeah, or surviving the next day after spending the night in a crappy hotel, like, you know, and kind of motivating each other and kind of helping each other through. Like, it just all binds you that little bit tighter. And so, I think the DPL was, I don't think it was really in their plans this time a year ago. I think the opportunity presented itself pretty late, and they kind of chose to run with it. But I think it's done them the world of good going into this year. That's still not to say that they're just going to walk in and be a top 4 team. I think they'll be very competitive. I think they'll be a top 8 team. And I think if they keep their head screwed on, they can get top 4 finishes. But that's the bit that they're going to really have to focus on this year.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. So kind of coming away from that and a bit more focused on the home circuit, we've got, I think, probably one of the most competitive CPPS seasons coming up this year that we've probably seen for a long time. And that's just coming off the back of last year as well. This is just kind of from what I've seen with your Paintball Performance announcements and things, and the stats there. Most notably, I think the big one is the Ducks coming back as well. They were always a team to cause an upset in the elite division beforehand. So what's kind of your predictions there? Have we got any dark horses? Have we got any standouts? Or I mean, I know is my prediction wrong?
I know there's a couple of little things still to be finalized. So my actual favorite thing about CPPS 2019 season was and I don't really know how this happened, but suddenly there was a glut of good teams in Division 1, right? Yep. Well, some of them were new, some of them have been around a little while and kind of managed to finally put the pieces together. But, you know, we had Tigers obviously got their, you know, old team, got their old roster back together and did good, right? And fair play to them. I hope they kind of continue to do good again this year. Like, I'd like to see them bring through new players more, but right now they're doing what they have to do to kind of stay in the mix, and fair play. Like, and then you had Gang and Skirmish Army, both almost completely new teams, kind of come out of nowhere and stamp themselves on it and get themselves into elite relatively quickly and actually do well. And Wraiths too, you know, Wraiths have been around a lot longer, but came all the way up from pretty much Division 5, I think, or something was there when they first started in CPPS, and have got themselves up and stayed in the elite division. And while at first glance you might think to yourself, well, why would adding 4 Division 1 teams to the elite division be any good? I think it's good because all of those teams are hungry, and it's just added to what was there was a bit of a gap in the elite division going into last season, like a top and bottom split. And by taking out the 15s and firm top teams, and 2, adding in those kind of hungry new teams who kind of have nothing to lose, and they're not kind of clinging on to anything from their past, like they're here to do stuff in the here and now. They it definitely spices it up a little bit.
Absolutely. I think one of the other big talking points as well is obviously the Jags and 1for1 have merged. That was kind of heavily concentrated on a couple of weeks last week, a couple of weeks
Yes.
ago. I've lost track of time as to when that was announced, but I think that's a big surprise as well. So, what's your expectation from that?
Well, you'd hope for their sake that bringing the two teams together fixes both teams' inherent problems. You know, both teams blew hot and cold last season. Um, I, I'll be honest, I really have no idea why 1for1 did, like, because they were pretty much rolling a similar roster from previous seasons. That's always been quite competitive, but
Yeah.
you know, clearly something changed there that they weren't able to fix just amongst themselves. And then with Jags, like, they kind of had the big breakthrough, but then they weren't able to kind of just hold on to that. That, I don't know whether it's a state of mind or specific players who were kind of coming in and out of the squad. Like, I'm not sure, but but like both teams had kind of pretty yo-yo-ish seasons. So yeah, the hope is for both those teams as they come together is that whatever's in the other side of the deal is kind of fixing the problem that they had in their camp, you know. And to be honest, like, they've got a huge roster, so if they don't have a solution on the bench at any point in time, then yeah, like, you know, then they just go back to the drawing board and kind of scratch your head again. But I think they're going to be a dangerous team this year.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of wide open, you know. I think Mustangs are probably favourite. I'm going to call them Mustangs because that's effectively what they are. I don't think they'll play as Mustangs, but whatever.
Yeah.
I think Mustangs are probably my favourite for the title still at the minute, just because of how much further ahead they were over everyone else.
Okay.
You know, like, even I think the gap to Sandbaggers in third was a good 40-50 series points or something. You know, it was a chunk. I think Sandbaggers will have another good year, probably a better year than last year, given that they're not going to get knocked out by a 15s team every other event.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they have a really horrible stroke of luck with how the draws land. But being a third seed team going into the season, they should do well to steer clear of that. Firm CPPS squad, I've heard a few different rumours about their roster. For my money, it could go really either way. They're either going to make top 4 every event again, like they did in 18, or they're going to be fighting relegation every event like they did in 19.
Okay.
So it depends which version of the roster I've heard is true.
Mm-hmm.
The 1for1 Jags team, I think they'll be in the mix. So that's probably going to be your top 4. I don't think I'm missing anyone obvious here. Ducks will be in there. I think Ducks might take an event or two to blow off the ring rust, because I don't think as a team they played much, if anything, last year.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I say, and then you've got like Rave, Skirmish Army, Gang, I believe, are carrying on this year. There was rumours that they weren't, but I think they're back in now, albeit with maybe a few changes to the roster.
Right.
Yeah, Tigers are always a threat, you know. Tigers are one of those teams where if the day starts well for them, they're dangerous, but if the day starts badly, they're probably not going to get it back. They're kind of they run on emotion.
Okay.
And if they don't, if it's not there at 9 o'clock in the morning, it's definitely not going to catch them up by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you know.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm just interested to see how it all shakes down. Like, hopefully I can get in the commentary box a fair bit this year and just talk through it all, because it is exciting. Like, I'm passionate about it. Like, I wish that's probably one thing I wish actually about the whole time when I was on Nexus, and it's really the whole driving force behind why the Paintball Performance page even exists, is that I felt like no one at any point was really giving a proper kind of I don't want to say service, but like real like commentary, real like insight, and kind of kudos to whatever the competitive, you know, whether they be pro, semi-pro, you know, like half decent teams were in the country. Like, you'd kind of go and read reports about the Millennium events or something, whether that be in magazines or online magazines or on Facebook, but like, it was all just talk about the event and the location, and there were this many fields and that many refs, and I was like, dude, I want to know, like, I want to know the inside story. Like just follow one team for the event and tell me all about them, you know?
Just that next
And
level of detail
yeah,
and stats and yep.
yeah, even if it wasn't statistical, to be honest, like
Hmm.
the stats is nice because it helps you illustrate the story. And actually, this, you know, stats obviously reveal certain things that maybe aren't obvious in the first instance.
Sure.
But yeah, I just felt like for years that wasn't being kind of told en masse, you know, and maybe that's got something to do with the fact that 15 years ago there wasn't really a central pro league in the country or whatever. But
Okay.
it never really materialized at any point in time. And I thought, well, I'm not in it now, so it's not a vanity project for myself because I'm not a pro team or an elite team or whatever.
Sure.
But like, I'd be it would be wrong of me to kind of have had that feeling for all those years and not want and not actually follow through on it now that I've got the opportunity in the position I'm in. I'm at all these events, like I have the chance to go and sit in the commentary tower and chat with, you know, Shelley or whoever's up there, and actually kind of give that bit back, you know. So hopefully the teams appreciate it and the people that play the events appreciate it, and actually get some genuine insight from the stuff I put out.
Is
Yeah.
it just yourself on the Paintball Performance kind of team, or is
No,
it
no. So
who else
there's
have we got?
another guy involved, a guy called Richard Neal. He used to work with me back when we both worked at Dye for a number of years, and it was actually Rich that started the page himself back when I was playing,
Okay.
and probably having a similar kind of conversation with him as we are now about that type of thing. He used to go to the events and he was the tech, and
Right.
obviously after about 9 o'clock in the morning, once everyone's bought their guns to him and you know, because they haven't changed their battery since the last event or whatever, and he got them out of the way. Like, there's not a great deal to do as a tech. Maybe if it's raining you have to clean a few more guns because people don't understand what happens to paintballs in the wet. But
Yeah.
and so he kind of found himself with a lot of time, and he would kind of make these, it wasn't quite so analytical, but it was like, you know, anecdotes and notes and things that he kind of tried to do it. He was doing it himself for a couple of years, and then it went quiet because Rich stopped working in paintball and he wasn't really around the events anymore. And we got talking 18 months or so ago now about just having a bit of a nostalgia chat, and we decided just to kind of ramp it up again and give it a go. So Rich still doesn't really come to the events much. Like he kind of acts as a sounding board mainly for kind
Okay.
of how, you know, we come up with ideas together, and then I'll kind of go away and find some numbers or something that do or don't, you know, prove it or whatever, and yeah, bombard him with a lot of text, and then we kind of prune it down into something that hopefully reads a bit better.
Yeah, for sure. I think they're certainly they're well made. They're really concise, but they've got the right kind of level of detail in there as well that's gonna interest those that want to read it. I think on the flip
Yeah.
side of that, it's also easy for people in the kind of the lower divisions to follow how all of that kind of works as well. So I think my only question would be is how is all of that worked out for those that kind of might not see it as immediately obvious? Is it
um
just a case of going online and getting all the
I,
results and
I
working
do.
out the
Yeah,
maths,
so
or do you
I have
Google it?
I have an Excel sheet that is growing exponentially, just with literally. So it's and every year well, you know, every month I seem to be adding new layers of info to it as I can kind of get my hands on it. So originally it just started out as I kind of kept scores. I went back to the very start of the 2018 season and kind of pulled all the scores from the CPPS website and just kind of went through and started building the performance rating, which is like a ELO rating thing, which I guess I'm not really an online gamer, but online gamers should be familiar with ELO ratings and stuff. And pulled all of those numbers out, and then the more analysis I've done, I start thinking to myself like, oh man, I wish I had like this level of detail or this kind of, you know, bit of info. And I generally just bug Ainsley until he kind of caves and, and gives
Yeah.
it to me. Like, so that was like last season. So from round 4 last season,
Hmm.
Ainsley started sending me like a scan with all of the actual score sheets from every match. So before it would just be I'd get the final score from the website, which actually on their website doesn't even show the finished score. It just shows the score difference.
Yep.
So it will show if the team won, and then +1, +2, +3, +4, like what the score margin was. But that could be 4-0, it could be 5-1, 6-2, whatever. But yeah, so from round 4, Ainsley's actually started giving me the score sheets, so I can now see stuff like the actual final score, but also it tells me like the order the points were scored in and the times at each point score and so on. And it's got things on there like timeouts and if teams have to start the point with 4 and stuff. So, and like I say, and at the moment I'm sitting on a lot of that info because I need to build up a bit more history with it before I can draw too many major conclusions. But that was the real eye opener for me, is that from both those events, the whole stat about if you win the first point, 70% of the time you'll go on to win the match. Like,
right.
I just kind of looked. I was just looking at them, and I think, I wonder what the kind of conversion rate is for, if you win the first point or lose the first point, whatever. And just kind of did it as a little exercise to see what it was, and I was like, that's a crazy number. And then for it to come out at pretty much exactly the same figure both events, I was like, this can't be a coincidence, like there's got to be an actual a reason here. And I kind of wanted to discuss that a little bit and see if I could kind of get to the bottom of maybe why that is, because I'm sure in the NXL, because obviously I've pulled data for DPL and NXL in the last year as well, but I don't get specifically like the score data for NXL and so on. But sure. I'm sure from watching the webcast, like anecdotally, it's not the same percentage. So I wonder if it's something specific to, maybe it's because we only play race like Mercy 4 here and not Mercy 5, or because of the shorter game clock, the first point tends to eat up a huge amount of the game, or whatever. Like, but I don't know. I've always had like a bit of a curious brain when it comes to things like that. So I just want to find out stuff. Like, it's kind of as well. Knowledge is like the all those numbers kind of illustrate the game so much more for me now when I watch it. And then like doing stuff like the predictions is real fun. It's always good for me when certain predictions come off, but it's also really fun for other teams. Like I had a fair few Div 1 teams in the last few events would kind of come up to me when, say, like if I predicted them to go out in the quarterfinals and they didn't or something, and they'd be like, I proved you wrong. And I'm like, you didn't prove me wrong, you proved yourself wrong. Like,
exactly. It gives everyone
because otherwise, if you just kind of keep going around doing what you're doing and always losing at quarterfinals, like that's not progression. That's not fun. Like the fact that I kind of held the mirror up and you actually thought, like, oh, shit, man, I don't hate keep losing at quarterfinals. let's buck that trend. Like I don't know. I'm not going to take credit for it, but I kind of like the fact that it's helped people look at stuff in a certain way and help them move their game on a little bit,
Yeah, I think it's also got different levels of player kind of interacting as well, because everyone who's kind of watching, I don't want to say on the sidelines or whatever, but from the other divisions, so from the D2, the D3, D4, even some Saturday players as well, can kind of get involved in that online before the event starts, and they can also comment and put their own predictions in based on the statistics that you have as well. And also it gives everyone else kind of, I don't want to call, I suppose it is kind of fans in a way, of everyone can kind of take their extra step as well on, hang on, now fortunately someone's done this data collection, now I can have a look and say, I think it's not necessary just on my favorite team that I'm making this prediction on. Now I've got something to back it up. So following on from that, what's kind of the next stage for Paintball Performance? Like how much further can it be taken?
Oh man, I mean, that kind of just comes down to like time, really, time and what like extra info I can blag out of the people that actually kind of hold it. Ideal world, I'd love to start doing stuff that includes players specifically more, but that's where it gets really difficult, because rather than just looking at a score and a result between two teams, you need to look at, maybe 3 or 4 variables for 10 different players on the field at any given moment,
Hmm.
and so I don't think any time in the future that will really come through. But I mean, like I say, the important part for me is, I mean, you were kind of hesitant to use the word fans there, but I want it to be fans.
Yeah.
I want people to have kind of an interest, or even like be emotionally invested even in a team, and that kind of support. Like I've seen, I know English team numbers dwindled in the millenniums and that over well, probably the last 10 years or so. But you go to some of these events, and like all of the French teams will, all bar maybe 1 or 2 of the other French pro teams, but all of the French players near enough that are at the event come Sunday afternoon finals. If Tauntauns are playing or Camp are playing or whatever,
Hmm.
like they'll be in the stands chanting for it.
Yeah.
Like there isn't a French paintball performance, but those teams hold that kind of level of interest with the other players. And I'd like to see more of that um, amongst the tournament playing community in the UK. Um, it's
Is that going to
it,
be made easier, do you think, by the fact that we've got a leg of the NXL Europe in CPPS this year?
I hope so. I hope so. Um, it's it'd be interesting to see how many UK teams kind of buy into that. I hope they do.
Even if it's
Um,
just 5 man. I,
yeah,
I think it's
honestly,
important
like,
for UK teams to get that experience because there's still going to be
yeah,
European teams playing in 5 man as well.
of course,
So,
of course. I think this year, I suppose, from a critical perspective, this year will be the kind of final, um, maybe not final, but like the strongest indicator yet as to whether the the circus touring style marquee event, like NXL Millennium,
mhm.
still really has legs in the kind of modern um, place in Europe. And I say that because you know Millennium, over its last few years, kind of team numbers were eroding, like um, cost was spiraling. The amount of support that's there to soften the blow for teams to go through these events was going away, and the NXL has still kind of marched on. Like the prices are still the same or
Mhm.
gone up in some cases. Like and but the team numbers are straining. Like Amsterdam aside, last year was,
Well,
I think,
it was the Paris event that for me was kind of the most noticeable.
yeah,
Just on the number of fields, there were 3 fields, including the pro field at Chantilly last
yeah,
year, which from like I had wanted to go to that Chantilly event for a long time because obviously
hmm,
that was one of the most popular big events in the Millennium Series, and unfortunately I never got the chance to do any of the mills as
yeah,
it was the mills. So to kind of go to that event and only have it on that scale, it was still enjoyable. Don't get me wrong.
mm,
But it was kind of sad to look from, you see all these older drone shots of once upon a time, there was like 8 fields, 6 to 8 fields
yeah,
at that event. So there's clearly something clearly isn't right. Or if it's just a case of the fact that paintball's changing and obviously the financial constraints just don't make it possible for a lot of teams anymore, which I think
mm,
would be very sad. But maybe there's another layer to it as well. I think the spectating thing is quite important, as in to kind of get members of the public in and watching as well. I think the exposure of each of those kind of European legs is really, really important. Um,
mhm,
I think the European side of things does it well because, as far as I'm aware, fans weren't charged to come and watch any of the pro games. I think the big difference to that, though, is that if you try and go and watch pro in the States, as in if you want a grandstand seat, it's
yeah.
going to cost. And
It
when I
it
was at
is.
World Cup last year, obviously I was like, oh, I'd love to kind of watch some pro stuff at World Cup. That would be great.
Mm,
But even as someone who's there kind of doing a bit of work and also wanting to watch as a fan, unfortunately, I'm not in the position to pay to go and watch for 20 minutes or whatever it might be. So I think if that kind of thing
mm,
is introduced over here, it's also going to be potentially catastrophic
Yeah.
from the point of
The,
we've got to fill the grandstands.
the main difference in the US though is that like in the US the NXL attendances are going up and they continue to drive up, and I think I want to go out on a limb and say all 5 events last year topped 200 teams. And I'm not talking 3-man and Sunday afternoon 10-man for all the teams that got knocked out. I'm talking take the team list on Wednesday afternoon before the event opens, and they're at least 180 plus, and World Cup is over 360 or something insane like that.
Sure.
So they've got a product, right? They've got a product that works for players. There's clearly people that want to go and do it, and also the pro division is a product that is, I don't want to say it's sellable, but there's enough interest there that the NXL can. There shouldn't be anything wrong with charging people to watch a pro match, right? Like maybe they could do do a different type of band or something, like where if you only want to watch that one particular game, it's like, I don't know, $5 or something, and then that particular area of the stands gets cleared out at the end of that match to let the next wave come in. I don't know. That's entirely their thing to figure out. If they feel that would put more bums on seats, then do it. Because ultimately, all of that stuff costs money, right? To have the grandstands, to have the staffing or whatever to manage it all. So they have to pay for it somehow, and the pro teams are already paying the most out of anyone to be there, whether it's coming out of the physical players' pockets or their rich owners' pockets or whatever. Who knows? But and that, I suppose ultimately that's where paintball wants to go, is to become a sport where you can put it in an arena and people will pay to come and watch it, right? I mean, the problem in Europe is that they're not packing the events out right now with enough teams so that come Sunday afternoon or Sunday morning even, when they cut the field in half, that suddenly means there's a lot of players who have obviously made travel arrangements to be there all 3 days because they wanted to play finals, but they're not. But so they'll stick around and watch, and it kind of builds the atmosphere up through the event. Now there's just not the volume of people to do that, and then kind of combined with that is the events aren't exactly in a location that pummels 1,000 people an hour through it, like just general public. I don't think we've ever really had an event like that in Europe. Maybe Malaga when it was in kind of Fuengirola, like 2007, 8, 9 was a decent one. Toulouse always got good numbers actually back in the day,
right.
But yeah, like Europe doesn't really have that either. So maybe they need to be smarter about where they're putting these events. Either you go, maybe the model for them in the future is to just have a circus pro division that either goes and pitches up, at one of the CPPS events, and that kind of becomes a host for the pro exhibition roadshow. And then there's going to be lots of paintball players who are excited about paintball already, and they're excited about paintball, which are going to be keen to come and see this roadshow on its one stop. Or you put it somewhere that's very public, but at the moment it's neither. So they really need to figure that out in the long term. Otherwise, just purely from a financial point of view, you can't run an event like the NXL, even if you chop down the number of fields that you're putting up each time to do all the other stuff that goes with it, with the trade village and hiring out venues and carting all of the gear around Europe to put this roadshow on. It's just not going to survive on 80 teams. It's probably not going to survive on 100 teams. They need it to be 150. So yeah, not even long term, like in the next year or so, they need to kind of solve that problem. And maybe this is why they're looking to things like CPPS, where because Ainsley's got 100 teams there ready made. So if they bring their European contingent and absorb a CPPS event, which is effectively the setup they've gone for, on paper that should translate into like 120 team NXL, right? So if that comes off, like happy days. But at the moment, 80 teams for a European roadshow kind of prize championship event is not where it wants to be. That's for sure.
Okay, then. We've discussed quite a lot about Europe, so I think we kind of need to come back a little bit to home a bit. Obviously, one of your hats that you've got to wear is your GI Sports Europe. What's your role there? What's the day-to-day office life of
Um,
yourself and the team?
I think the official job title is doer of many things.
Okay.
So I mean, GI Sports it covers paintball top to bottom, back to front, right? So we do all the rental equipment, from the Tipmans and the paintballs and the goggles and the coveralls. We do 68 cal, we do 50 cal. We make the Splat Masters, so that under 12s, like 8-year-olds and whatever can play paintball. We make tournament gear, we make tournament paint. Like, we literally supply everything, that you could need to play paintball, right? In that on paper, if you wanted to own a paintball business, or if you wanted to be a paintball player even, you could get everything you need from us. So what we have to do here on a daily basis encompasses all of that, and we're actually not like as big a team as you might think. There's only seven or eight of us, I think, in the whole UK facility. And obviously the three that people will probably be familiar with is myself, Mike, and Adrian, because we're the actual the sales guys, and we go to the events and so on.
Sure. Yep.
And yeah, like I say, we do absolutely everything. So it could just be a rental field, stocking up paint for their rental games this weekend. This coming weekend, actually, we've got the UK Woodland Masters. So
you're so good at doing all these leads. It's like taking my job away from me. No, to be fair, you're doing it far better than I ever have in the past. So go for it.
I definitely don't have time to add a podcast to my schedule, so this isn't going to be happening on the regular. But yeah, so we've got Woodland Masters this weekend. So a week or two back, or for the last couple of weeks, I've been testing different grades of paint, making sure, like, keeping an eye on the weather, so making sure I've got options for different outcomes. And then what's today, Tuesday? So yeah, yesterday we said, right, fine, that's the batch we're going to use this weekend. It's all been kind of wrapped and set aside. So on Friday we'll load the van up, ready to go on Sunday morning. Mike's going to drive the van down there. He'll be the guy giving the paint out on the day, for all the teams that play the event, and and so on. And we've got CPPS. Another thing we're organising at the minute is we do like a trade conference for all of our trade customers. So we've got that coming up. I've been kind of behind the scenes organising that. So like the location and getting out the invites and so on. And yeah, just everything. You just kind of have to be prepared to pick up the phone, and whatever is happening on the other end of it, you kind of got to run with it. We don't really separate too kind of heavily who can do what things, just because you all need to be able to do it at any given moment, really.
Yeah, very much a shared kind of load of as you say, roles. Okay.
Yeah.
Back onto the Masters then. What's your predictions there this year with that? Obviously there's been quite a big shake up in the format of how they're doing it, so it's now split into two brackets. I think they've got it as challenges and something else.
Champions and challengers, I think it is.
Something along those lines. Yep.
I do like it. Like the Woodland Masters, as they're not without their own challenges. So we've been supporting them since day one, since the very first event. And we go down there, we provide paint for their teams. But for anyone who doesn't know, like, Woodland Masters actually sell the paint on the day. The whole thing is their product. We just support it with our presence and making sure that the paint is managed correctly. And we've done that since day one. Now, when they first kind of came back on the scene, it was about getting a lot of old and new players, but just back out to play woods ball, because woods ball had kind of fallen off everyone's radar. And it was, it's really good. It's gone from strength to strength over the years. But in the last few seasons, there's been a real turn from people coming back or coming into woods ball to have fun and a little bit of competition, but I think primarily the emphasis was on fun to begin with, and that shifted slowly as it's kind of almost been a bit of an arms race in terms of like really good woods ball players in the last couple of years. Guys like Giles Marshall, who, I mean, if he ever listens to this, like his ego will be twice the height of him for sure. But great player. Genius back in the day, or genius now still, especially on a woods ball field. Like the way the guy thinks about paintball is incredible. and things like the kind of resurgence of the UK Predators. Like, I think Marcus had his feet up, not really playing paintball for a few years, and then suddenly there's a bit of woods ball and Predators are back, and now Marcus is like with his Predcam and his Predcam guns, and hell, he's probably got a Predcam house, I don't know. And so there's kind of been a bit of an arms race in terms of some of these top teams have got really good at woods ball again, and almost a little bit like CPPS, there's been a bit of a gap kind of created between the better teams and the teams that are, I don't want to say bad teams, they're just teams that are playing a bit more for fun. They like the competition, but they probably have as many good events as they do bad events where it just doesn't come off for them. And I think the guys at Woodland Masters maybe been trying to think of different ways to manage this gap in the standard, because otherwise, under the old format that they've been using the last few years, you could have someone like Blow, who are a team that, Blow beat the All-Americans when they came over here to play. Like, Blow a really, really good paintball team with a stacked roster. They could come up against a team that's playing their first ever 5-man woods ball event, and that's not the ideal situation for customer retention, for starters.
Yeah, of course. Just getting absolutely demolished by a team called Blow.
Getting stoved in under a minute is not the kind of experience. So I feel like they've needed to address that situation in the last year or so, and this is probably the best solution to come up with, because it gives the pro teams the chance to go hammer and tongs, and everyone knows what they're getting into, and that'll be a real good ding dong. But then also you've still got a competitive division below it, but it just allows a team, if they're not having the greatest day, to not get absolutely battered by a hot pro team, and two, the teams that do want to develop into a competitive team have got the chance to go up and taste it, and if it doesn't work for them, they can come back down, do it the next event. So it's about as flexible as a system as you can kind of come up with, sort of short of everyone arriving on the day and kind of asking for a show of hands who fancies the pro division and who doesn't, kind of thing, which wouldn't actually work as an organizational structure. So I like it. I think it'll be good. Who
do you think is going to be at the top this year? Is it going to be the usual suspects, as in Blow, Russians, Turks? Obviously, the Preds have got to start in the Challengers, I believe, this season. Because
Preds are coming back in. So I do think Preds will go up. If by some fluke it doesn't happen this event, they'll go up in the first two events.
Sure.
Blow will be in the top 3 for sure. Underdogs are dangerous. Turks, is it Turks Black? I think with Turks Red is the top one. Red is their top squad. Red are very dangerous if they've got the same roster as last year. Black could be one of those yo-yo teams. You're not really sure what you're going to get with them. Who else? I'm not sat in front of the list at the minute. You have to throw a few at me. Russians are top side. I wonder if Russians are maybe keeping a bit more of an eye on 10-man at the minute. I know obviously they're booked in for ICC again, and they're going to be playing the ECPL. So 10-man classic hyperball. So that's not to say they're not going to show up and try and win the UK Woodland Masters. I think they'll still do that, but I wonder if maybe there will be a bit more of a focus on developing themselves with a view to the 10-man this year. That's my only, I suppose, a concern for Russians in terms of how much silverware they're going to lay their hands on this year. Is their eye on the other prize maybe a bit too much?
Yeah, that makes total sense. We're actually going to hopefully have some of those guys come on and talk about classic paintball.
Cool.
I didn't want to cover that too much with you, especially towards the end of this podcast.
No. Yeah, let's not open another can of worms.
Yeah, no, of course. We've also got other people in there. We've got the War Pigs, Nemesis as well, I believe, are up there playing in the kind of the pro bracket.
Yes.
As well. So I'm hoping like those guys can spring a bit of a surprise, because neither of them are bad teams at all, especially Nemesis. They've finished on the pro podium before in the past. Nemesis
again, it's kind of roster dependent, because I've heard of a few different ins and outs of theirs in the last few events, and so it kind of depends. That they definitely have a podium roster and a not podium roster, if that makes sense.
Sure.
War Pigs is a good example of a team that's kind of come along and developed, actually. Like I wouldn't have said 2 years ago that they were like a highly competitive woods ball team. They were very much about like the fun and the development and stuff. And then last year they had a couple of really good results, and I think it's kind of pricked their ears up to like, hey, maybe we're actually a bit better than this than we're giving ourselves credit for. Like, let's see what happens if we actually apply ourselves. And so, I think maybe they're not going to come out the blocks and win round one, but I think they're a team that will grow into the season and continue to do well. Yeah. So apologies, Steve Tumbles, if I've just put the mockers on you.
Not at all. Those guys are great. I did them a video last year, which kind of proves that if you're looking to get some media coverage and things like that, you're prepared to make that next step up towards what it is you want to be doing. I know completely that they're definitely shifting from, yes, they still want to have fun, but at the same time, they're there to take it seriously, and they were getting frustrated when they were making silly mistakes, and they know quite well how to walk a field. They're certainly doing the right things. I don't know whether or not it comes down to the individual performance and how they kind of gel together, but they've been playing together for a long time now. So I think there's going to be a definite demonstration of how they're kind of taking this season at the first event on Sunday, and it would be really good to see them do well and kind of be the upset, so to speak, as in obviously because you've got the promotion relegation side of things as well. So I think if they stayed up this first event and had a couple of nice wins under their belt, I think that would really kind of show that they're taking that next step. And the same goes for, like you say, the underdogs as well. We already know that they've won the pro event in the past, so it'd be really, really interesting to see how that all pans out.
Yeah. And technically, as a team, those guys just keep getting better and better. Like, not to kind of have a woods ball versus sup air kind of debate, but like they played CPPS last season. They went up to Division 2 and won one event and had like 2 seconds and a third or something in Division 2. Like a really strong season. I think their worst finish was 5th or something, and have now obviously moved up again to Division 1. I know they've been to 1-for-1 training a lot through last year, and I think even some of them been down training woods ball at 1-for-1's woods ball site as well.
Transferable skills, isn't it? You learn
exactly, and they're just getting kind of sharper and more experienced, and they've definitely got weapons in that team. So yeah, like Tristan's a bit of a beast. Lachlan is a lot of chat off the field, and credit to him, he does deliver on the field. But yeah, like they're a good team. They've got a good team spirit. They're not just a bunch of guys that show up once a month to play paintball and then talk about it on WhatsApp in between. Like they're out there together a lot. Maybe not all of them all the time, but they're a good group. And that serves them well.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Right. I think it's a good time to bring this to a close. Just a couple of final questions for you.
Sure.
What's kind of your fondest memory of paintball, either whether that be playing, whether that just be a general experience? What's your best moment so far?
Oh man, that's a tough one. There's a few. I mean, it's generally associated with like success at certain events. So I played PSP World Cup one year in semi-pro with Tonton, and we won it. That was ridiculous. Just insane. Like, to say that I've won that event, even though it wasn't pro, like I've still won the PSP World Cup, which is what it was called back then. But like I've won World Cup at a level, like, and that's ridiculous. A good few seasons with Nexus, like the 2011 being Dynasty 5-0 on home soil, was amazing. Only soured by the fact that we didn't follow it up in the final and we ended up finishing second. The whole 2013 season with that team was amazing, and just was, if anything, was just a glimpse of what we could have done had we had that roster for a few seasons in a row. Like, yeah. So just all the successes.
One moment.
One moment. Oh man, I couldn't
Success
pick.
Is that the one moment? Success? Can we say that?
Well, I'll tell you what. Actually,
winning.
One moment sticks in my mind was actually at the end of 2009 season. I'd played the whole season with London Tigers, and I went and played the PSP World Cup with Nexus in semi-pro, and I think we came third semi-pro that year. We lost to like Excessive in the semi-final or something, like, and like a good Excessive team, but when they were a 7-man team dabbling in PSP. And on the way home in the airport was when I was sat one side of the table, and for some reason the whole team was sat the other side of the table, and that was when I was formally asked to join Nexus like properly again after being in and out the squad a few times. Like, that's probably my favorite moment. Yeah.
There we go then. And finally, if you can get this in a sentence or two, where do you see paintball in 10 years?
Christ alive. I mean, paintball's going to be around, right? There's always going to be all formats of it. Do you mean tournament paintball specifically?
I would say so. This was a question that came from Neil.
Okay.
So usually with Neil, it's the more serious stuff. So.
In 10 years' time, I can see it having broken itself down and rebuilt itself again. But quite what that will look like, I don't know.
Okay. Well, there we go. A kind of positive sentence. The fact that paintball is going to be around in 10 years, I think, is going to be good for us.
Oh, absolutely. Paintball's going to be around forever in one format or another. Like, if we're talking about high-level tournament paintball, I think the current status quo is not in the best place in Europe, especially, and so it will change. And I think in the short term, that means losing a little bit, whether that's the NXL Pro Division changing how it works, or whether it's even the NXL and it becoming back in a new format or whatever. But in 10 years' time, we should have fixed it. If not, we're idiots.
Okay, there we go, everyone. Right, so thank you very much for joining me today, Ash. I know we've both got things to be getting on with after this, so I'm going to leave you to that. Thank you very much for listening, everybody, and have a good one.
Yeah, cheers, guys. Thank you.